You're listening to NIL Now, a podcast dedicated to the name, image, and likeness of today's college and high school athletes.
So we're going to explore the crazy and wildly interesting world of name, image, and likeness.
NIL Now, covering the latest sports business headlines and keeping you informed on the nation's top performers. This is NIL Now, where the stars of tomorrow are getting noticed today.
It's the Wild Wild West, but we're wrangling it in.
Presented by Headline Studio and Reddit. Here are your hosts, Lauren Zisler and Kevin Jones.
Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of NIL Now. It is our 30th episode. 30. What do you make of that, KJ? 30th episode? How you feel about that?
Let's go. 30 for 30.
I know. I can't believe we're on the 30th episode right now. Before we dive in, we're going to give a little love to Headline Studio and Reddit for getting this thing going, getting this podcast off the ground. And we, of course, are out wherever you get your podcasts, so be sure to subscribe. Looking forward to our guest joining us later in the show, University of Texas San Antonio women's soccer player Marlee Fray. Definitely looking forward to hearing from her. But in the meantime, we got a little collective shakeup.
What's my name?
NIL Headlines.
Oh, KJ and I always go off the rails before we even get on this podcast, y'all. If you only had snippets of the conversations that went on prior to hitting record, yeah, it's quite entertaining. So, we were just doing some ludicrous shout outs here just a little bit ago, rapping and having some fun.
You wasn't supposed to tell them. They were supposed to just be like, oh, snap, he's on here. You know?
Let them figure out why we're being so cryptic right now. Okay. So we're gonna shake things up a little bit, and we got some intel from a dear friend of yours, and we're gonna drop some hokey knowledge on some people today. So of course it's our 30th episode, so this headline fits right in as it involves the number 30. So according to an article from On3, at least 30 collectives have merged, folded, and or been acquired by another agency since the start of the summer in 2021. So that number represents 13% of the collectives that launched almost 2 years ago. So in this article in On3, it mentions that Virginia Tech once featured 5 different collectives, and now it only features 2, which are Triumph NIL and the Hokie Way. So a former guest on the show, we love Brendan Hill. He is quoted saying, "The more noise you have, I think it just lowers the credibility of the industry and of the efforts when it comes to having too many collectives at one school." How do you feel about this? You feel like Brendan's spot on? I mean, I know he's your buddy and you guys are in this thing together. Break this whole thing down. And what does all this mean?
You know, I think that one of the biggest things that I would say that Brendan has brought to the table for our team is, you know, the thought process behind alignment and basically being aligned with the athletic department. Anything that has anything to do with athletics and funding, because obviously NIL is a big part of that. So if everyone's on the same page, whether that be if you have Learfield or one of those type of entities at your school, and then you have the athletic department, you got all the coaches and the athletes, and then the collectives, and then also the fund, like at Virginia Tech is called the Hokie Club, where they garner and gather funds for scholarships and facilities. So if you're not all on the same page, you can imagine all those different entities kind of being fragmented in the different spaces without, proper communication and everybody's trying to run their own game. I think that NIL is the last piece to the puzzle, but right now, as far as priority, it should be one of the first couple pieces to the puzzle. But it's been the last to the party. And, with all the rules and regulations in the beginning and also apprehension from the schools, things weren't aligned. I would say in year one, but at Virginia Tech now, I think things are aligned. Like you said, you read and heard there's been like 5 different, collectives. And I also like to say the Hokie Way is not a collective. It's a charitable foundation that's related to this space, but from a charitable foundation. So if a donor or someone wants to give and kind of write those funds off, they go through the Hokie Way. But they're kind of like the charitable arm for Triumph. Yeah, so we're partners. We're kind of like partners versus in competition.
Okay, that's good to know. And I think those are some of the questions I would ask because it brings up a lot of good points. Okay, so in this case, really there is a good bit of synergy and really they collide, they coincide with each other. Mm-hmm. let's just say the two of them don't. Let's just pretend we're at a school and you've got two separate, let's just say we've got a version of you all at a school and then the version of the Hokie Way at a school, or that's not charitable. Let's just say they both are kind of competing against each other. How does that work? I mean, do they sign the same players? Are the same players involved in this? Or, I mean, that's my question. Is I feel like this could get very convoluted.
Yeah, and I would say that probably last year it was more convoluted. Virginia Tech named 3 collectives last year when we first came out at the spring game last year. And it became, more of, I would say it was competitive. It was a competitive landscape, and that's not necessarily a problem. It just becomes, I would say not as clear for the actual athlete, the people who we're trying to support. So when you have more than one collective, you have to consider if they've signed an athlete that you're trying to do business with, if they have a contractual agreement that conflicts with a new opportunity. Like, these are the type of things why you would want to be under one house that can, they know who you are. They've probably created your brand. Always can look over contracts and make sure that if you have a car dealership over here who wants to do a deal and another one, you get the best deal, right? Be able to look at that contract and work those things out. And then if another, entity comes along, we want to make sure that those dates don't coincide, that you have to show up to do an appearance for something, and that there's not a conflict of interest as far as contracts or companies go.
Okay, so really a lot of times in most of these cases, there are different collectives working with some of the same athletes, but they're kind of having to, in many ways, sort of run recon to avoid overlap.
Correct. And you always want to do that. And, I would say that both collectives will have to be, willing to do that and be cooperative. So let's say if you have 5 or 6 different collectives trying to, talk to the same athletes about the same type of stuff. And it just becomes messy, becomes messy. It's extra conversations that don't need to be had if you're one. I think there's always, I think, a spot for competition, but in this space, it seems like the more you're aligned and moving in one direction, the better it goes for the athletes in the schools.
Yeah. And I could imagine that being a big piece of this. And, I would be curious to know too, do a lot of athletes sign exclusive agreements, or are they pretty open-ended, I guess?
Yeah. So when we first started this, a lot of student athletes and coaches were a little bit more leery about exclusive contracts, just from the standpoint of like just somebody can being in control of what's going on with the athlete. In the past, it's normally, the coaches and athletic departments are all handling the things that need to be handled for the athletes. And so in the beginning, the exclusive, I think people were afraid of that a little bit, but now I'm seeing more and more exclusive contracts happening these days, now that, maybe there's a trusted source at a university where, they don't mind that because they know that it's safe. See, like for us, we have a lawyer on staff. We have, brand managers, people who are doing the contracts. So it's not, and it's all kind of Blacksburg, of Virginia Tech, people who support the Hokies. So it's not as separate as it could be at some other places. Or if someone from Washington, D.C. started an NIL company and was targeting Virginia Tech and they hadn't any ties to Virginia Tech. So it all depends on how the collectives are set up.
Yeah, that answers a lot of questions. And these are kind of questions that I guess, have sort of crossed my mind over the time, just being the fact that there are multiple collectives. And so kind of interesting, getting to this point. Great to hear your insight. So jump into our next headline before we get Bobak on the horn here. So this is kind of fun. The popular EA Sports college football video game is set to return next summer, and an EA Sports representative confirmed with ESPN that the game will include the names of actual college football players. EA has contracted with One Team Partners, which will bring players' likeness into the game. All FBS football players will have the opportunity to opt in and use their likeness in the video game. All players will be paid for doing so. Of course, the big question that most people are going to ask immediately is, what is the money involved? What is the price tag on that? And those details are still currently being worked out. And so, first off, I mean, this has probably been something that's been talked about a long time. I feel like the EA Sports video game side of things, as NIL was sort of in its prehistoric days, prior to its inception when it was still a concept. I feel like for whatever reason, the whole video gaming industry was one thing that a lot of people talked about how can these kids be a part of this and have their name, image, and likeness represented and also make a return on that. And I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think it's awesome if you think about, like you said, back in the day, like when I was playing, they had me on there, but you know, like you said, you got your name and stuff on there, but like, how are you not compensating? You know, it's different when it's the university that you are a part of, right? You feel like you're giving back you might feel like you're giving back to the community, or, you know, the jersey sales is coming back right back into the athletic department for, you know, scholarships and things like that. But when it's an outside entity, another business using your name, image, and likeness for their sales and not compensating you, I think is kind of crazy.
Well, what does compensation look like in this case? Like, I'm curious to know, like, if you had to put a price tag on it, because again, they're basically saying everyone can opt in or out of being in the game and getting compensated. And my question would be, number one, what is the compensation? And number two, obviously, if you're in a more prominent role and not necessarily a backup, do you get compensated more than the other person because your name might be highlighted more than another? So I'm curious to know if it's tiered, if it's all equal.
Yeah, that's the conflict. You know, reading some of the articles and things like that, they say if they can't come to the specific agreement on who makes what, then they'll just make it all even. That was kind of like the solution. So
Think that they're going to be able to come to a resolution with that? I mean, because I feel like there's so many ways you can slice it.
You know, starters could be one thing and backups can be another if that switches. But then you got to come to managing all of that, right? So what if someone gets injured or down, somebody who was a third string or a walk-on becomes a starter because of some situation? Now you got to manage. Okay, now I got to go back and try to figure out who gets paid what. That it becomes a whole cluster. I'm not saying they shouldn't. I think they should, but I'm saying, can you imagine what type of headache that might be if you start off one way and then all of a sudden you're a starter? Does your pay now change?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's exactly what I'm wondering. Because this thing could go so many different ways with how the game shakes out. And so I don't know. I guess you could almost have classifications, basically being like, okay, these players fall into this classification, which equals this amount, and so on and so forth. But
like, think if someone does something off the field that's not right. Do you then cut their check?
Correct.
Because they're still probably going to be in the game. You're not going to take them off the game unless you are. Like, is this an endorsement deal? Is this an endorsement deal, or is this just a licensing? You know what I'm saying? Like, endorsement is different than a licensing deal. So endorsement is like, I'm endorsing you as a person on and off the field. And if you mess up, then we take it away. But a licensing thing is, I have your license. You license your name, image, and likeness to us. We use your likeness on the game, and you just get, a portion of sales or however they're going to do it. But that's different than an endorsement deal.
Yeah. And then here's the other thing too is you have the different players and obviously their roles, right? And you would assume obviously your skill players might be getting higher paid, would be in that higher tier bracket. But like, what if you have a team that literally kicks 6 field goals and your kicker, does he get any recognition for that? Because typically the kicker is always going to be the one that gets left out to dry.
Yeah. And so this is the thing that's kind of weird about it is it's probably going to be all figured out before the season. You get what I'm saying? Like, that number that they're going to give to everybody is probably going to be figured out before the season and not.
Oh yeah, it would have to be.
And I wouldn't think that they would be adjusting numbers during the season. That'd be crazy. Some type of live ticker is like, hey, Lauren Sisler, that backflip was a 10.
Yeah.
NIL Now with Lauren Sisler and Kevin Jones.
If you want to learn more about name, image, and likeness, you need to go to The Source. The NIL Now podcast from Headline Studio and Reddit highlights the biggest storylines.
NIL is not a cherry on top. It needs to be a part of these young men and women's future to, further their careers. You should be able to leave college with something.
Subscribe to NIL Now on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
lots to unpack there. And so why not bring in our good friend, Mr. Bobak from Reddit, to unpack a little bit of this EA Sports, because we know this has been a hot topic, and the Redditors out there are dying to weigh in. What up, Bobak?
Hi, everybody. It's great to be back. Let's talk some EA Sports. If it's in the game, it's in the game.
I was about to say, give us your best. It's in the game.
I'm old enough to remember playing EA Sports games on my Genesis before they even added all that extra stuff. It was Lakers versus the Celtics and the NBA playoffs, which was the most realistic basketball game I'd ever seen. It wasn't the most exciting game now that I look back on it, but man, it looked so awesome. And all the players were there. They had special moves, like if you knew where to hit the shoot button with Jordan, he'd do this kind of gliding through the air thing. If you had Barkley, he'd do the gorilla dunk, where he would basically leap from the key all the way from the end of the key all the way into the basket. But man, I loved that game. And that was before Madden was ported over. And then I still have copies of all the Genesis versions of like Bill Walsh College Football, which was the original before, after a couple of years, they decided to drop it. Because for a while there, especially on Genesis, they were trying to have like licensees with famous people like Pat Riley basketball, Joe Montana football, obviously John Madden football, and Tony La Russa baseball. And then I think with college football, they just dropped Bill Walsh because no one really knew who he was after a certain point. It's funny now we've gone from like the teams being licensed to be used to talking about the players. So it's exciting. It's been a long time coming.
And I love the fact that you brought up Sega because, you said Genesis, but
Sega.
I mean, I'm some old school. I've got to admit to you, I'm all about the old school Nintendo, the Sega Genesis. Of course, I was all big into like Sonic the Hedgehog, although Tecmo Bowl was my jam on Nintendo. All right. With Bo Jackson and those whatchamacallit, the fans in the stands and all those like terrible graphics, but it was literally the best, and you could only run like 4 plays. But literally grew up on that stuff. But with that being said, I was telling Kevin this in the opening segment. What's so interesting, and you kind of mentioned it, Bobak, is that as name, image, and likeness was like in prehistoric times prior to it really finding its inception and really just the concept of it, I feel like the gaming industry was one of the big things that was always talked about. Like, how can these kids, make some money off of their name, image, likeness on these videos, and these video games, and obviously being a big part of it. And I think number one, EA Sports going in this direction is probably going to make a mountain load of money doing this, because I think it's going to reinvigorate the brand. But we were sitting here going back and forth on how do you compensate these guys? And, if you have a roster of guys, you have your starters, your backups, is it fair to give everyone the same amount? But is it also fair to go in a different direction? Because, oh, by the way, you might get a guy that's benched 2 weeks into the season and then that's it. So there's so many things that can go into it.
I mean, that was sort of the famous thing about the NCAA football games when they were still coming out, because the last edition was 2014. So, it was a while ago now, now we're in 2024, or 2023, pardon me. But, it's fascinating too, because they used to have the cover athlete was always someone who had just finished. Usually it was a Heisman winner, but sometimes Heisman winners would stay and they would use, but the player had just graduated, so they could pay them to be on the cover of the game. And or at least put them on the cover of the game without violating various NCAA rules. But it's interesting, how do they compensate them? I mean, one of the critique and one of the things that came up on Reddit was, is this game going to actually end up being good? And some people are like, oh, it's highly anticipated, it's going to be good. I'm like, okay, hold up. If that's your criteria for why a video game is going to be good, I can point to a bunch of video games that were supposed to come out and be incredible. And then, the hype never matches it. But I think the fear is it's going to be microtransactions, which EA has been wont to do. Maybe that's what they'll do. If you're in the game, we'll let you get like your first 10 microtransactions for free. But I don't know. I mean, I assume it's not going to be too much for the reasons you said, Lauren, because I couldn't imagine for those very reasons. I mean, what if you give somebody a great deal because you think they're projected to be a hit, and then next thing you know, they're in the coach's doghouse or get booted from the school for off the field. There's plenty of players who are supposed to be the next great thing that either just don't pan out or something really goes askew. I think for the sake of the sheer number of players they're going to be dealing with, I think they should just come up with a fairly standard contract, unless you're featured on the cover or they're going to add some extra imagery of you. Like, I imagine I could see them with, if there was like a reigning Heisman champ, like a Caleb Williams, them being on the cover or just being featured in the game. If any of the major players are returnees, maybe, because I mean, the old NCAA games also used to have all the major end of season awards. So if if you're a Blintikoff winner and you're a reigning Blintikoff winner, they might have your picture in the game as well. And then maybe that person therefore gets that extra bonus for use of your image or use of your likeness in addition to just being on the roster. But it's certainly fun. I wonder how they're going to possibly manage all the thousands of players who are going to have to say, I want to be a part of this game. Like, that in and of itself is going to be crazy. And I mean, what happens for the people who don't want to be in the game? And one of my favorite comments on Reddit talking about this on our CFB was Iowa State fan C Team 19. They'll just hire Jordan Peele to come up with the names for the rest of the players. Just kind of going back to that classic Key and Peele. There'll be a Buckshaw, Crenshaw, quarterbacks. Oh my goodness. That would be awesome. By the way, that should be the license. EA needs to get those guys to be a part of this game just to make up all the generic player names. Or especially as, if you do a dynasty mode or a campaign mode where you're playing the same team until the 2050s, you can have new player names that are come up by those two guys.
I know there's a lot to unpack here, and it's really funny listening to some of the Redditors talking about it. And then, of course, they get into like the coaches that might not want to be a part of it as well. They, of course, mentioned Nick Saban. What if he just sort of bails on it? Or what if everybody in Tuscaloosa says, we're not going to be in this game, and now they have to, Alabama's not on board, and then they have to change their name to like the Tuscaloosa Blue Wave or something like that, generic. That came from Corgi Koala. I think it's going to spark some interest, maybe some controversy for sure. But it'll be something that people are definitely counting down to, I can imagine.
Me mentioning Nick Saban, I remember some folks were thinking it would be funny if they decided to go with that kind of a Madden naming convention like Saban College Football 2024. But as was pointed out, unfortunately, this user deleted their name, so I don't know what their name is. But Madden had been out of coaching and working on TV for a decade before they made the game, so we'd have to do the same here. That's right. We're looking at Rick Neuheisel College Football 2024.
That's not going to work. Yeah, but I'm just saying, as far as like a household name, like who could it be as a coach right now?
Yeah.
There's a couple of really good characters. What's the Oklahoma coach? Oh gosh, he's still around and he's just hilarious. Barry Switzer. Barry Switzer would be hilarious.
Switzer.
Oh, Barry Switzer. Yes, I was like, oh, yes.
How about Jerry Jones? How about Jerry Jones? No, what's the Redskins GM?
Dan Snyder?
Snyder football.
I do love one person laid it out. He said, what's literally going to happen is, this was Toxic Steve 13. They're literally going to offer every player the same thing, $100 and a free copy of the game. That's it.
I wouldn't blame them for doing that. I think that's a great, maybe a slap.
I wouldn't either.
That's terrible.
Kevin, let me ask you this. KJ, sorry. I went mommy mode, went Kevin.
What's my name? All right, there you go.
Okay, so if they came to you and said $100 free game to have your name on there, or you just walk away and say, screw that, I don't want that, that's not good enough. If everyone across the board is getting the same thing, like, wouldn't you rather be on the game? Like, I'm just going to put it this way. This is just my feeling about it. Now, I never played an ounce of football, so I can't truly say that I would ever know what it would be like to be in a video game. But it's just kind of like the performers for the Super Bowl don't get paid, right? Because it's like being at the pinnacle. It's like getting to be the headline of the biggest game of the year. Okay. And so they look at it like, this is my award-winning moment, and I'm going to do it for free. So like EA Sports, like this whole video game thing, like, wouldn't you rather be in the game and just get paid $100 like everybody else? Or are you going to sit and pout and kick and scream and not be in it?
$100 in a free video game is BS.
Okay, it might be BS, but would you turn it down? Because everyone else is either going to say yes or no, but would you turn it down just to make a point, or would you just say it's fine, just do it?
I think the sad truth is that people, if it's $100 and plus the game, that people are gonna just sign it because it's like peer pressure. Everybody's doing the same thing. But I think, far as if you think about what the business is going to be making off of your name, image, and likeness, then it's a different number. And I'm not saying that they're going to be able to come up with the perfect number, but I know we said 100 plus the video game. That's just something we came up with. That's not necessarily what it's going to be, but I just hope it's not that specific.
It's an interesting question.
Yeah, it's pressure. It's pressure on both. It's going to be pressure on both ends. Like the video, like they're going to, because of this name, image, and likeness era, they're going to have to come up with something that sounds feasible to a lot of people, most people, versus, doing something where they can get a lot of blowback and the athletes and people start talking about, oh, this is crap. They don't want that negative energy either. I would think that they would come up with something.
It's going to be interesting too, because I wonder how many people would buy the game for a specific player. And I think that it's going to be a really interesting balance there, because it's a nationwide international release, but we know it's really just aimed at the United States. And so I could see their counter argument, only because it's like, look, if you're going to be a high caliber NIL player who's bringing in big deals, still, I can't necessarily name the ones for some of the schools, while people in that fan base certainly can. So I think it's going to be interesting in terms of people who are fans of Texas will like the fact that there's Texas players in it, while people who are hypothetically Boston College fans are not necessarily going to care that all the Texas players are included, so. But it's interesting. I could see why it's just going to be a real. I like the idea of there being a base level one, and then bonuses for if you're included in other ways, like the cover or reigning award winner or something like that. But man, because EA is such a giant monster of a company, and I mean that in the sense that they just need to get this thing out there, and they know people will buy it, and they'll lap it up no matter what, in the same way they would buy this latest edition of Madden. I think they're just hoping to cue that up. Yeah.
All right, before we let y'all go, give us your best "It's in the game" voice. If you could be the voice of and get paid to be the voice of EA Sports, "It's in the game," give it to us. I want to hear it. KJ, you first.
EA Sports, it's in the game.
Ooh, I like that. That was solid. All right, Bobak, throw it to us. Give it to us, buddy.
EA Sports, it's in the game.
Okay. I kind of gave you my best version at the beginning, but okay, here we go. Ready? EA Sports, it's in the game. KJ.
Good job, Al. Good job.
You're listening to NIL Now.
All right, now we enter into our third and final segment of episode number 30. Let's welcome in Marlee Fray to the show. She's a forward on the women's soccer team at the University of Texas, San Antonio. She signed NIL deals with Dexcom, Firefly Recovery, and is a runner's rising athlete at UTSA. Thanks for joining us, Marlee. How's it going?
Hi, everyone. It's going pretty good. It's nice to meet everybody.
Just kind of off the top, you made the decision to transfer from UCF, obviously being just a couple hours from the campus there, and transferring to Texas. Just give us a little bit about your career and sort of how you've seen your career kind of climb over the years and to what landed you where you are now.
Yeah, it honestly was it's a long process too. But what kind of helped is my whole family played soccer. Both my parents played through college and a little bit after college. My younger brother plays in the MLS right now. My older brother just stopped before he went to college, and he still plays to this day. So it kind of ran in the family. I grew up watching all kinds of games from both of their teams and watching wars in my house over soccer games. So it kind of was bred in me from a long time, and I just loved it ever since. But yeah, I started my college career at UCF, and it was a good experience for what it was. But I just realized that I needed to go somewhere where I can excel. A lot of what my controversy and things that I went through was my injuries. I've had 4 knee surgeries, have had 2 ACLs and meniscus repairs, and then I had to have both of my meniscuses redone after that. Both of my meniscus repairs failed, so they just went in and cleaned it up after that. So that took up a lot of my college career. So I tore my first ACL and meniscus going into my senior year of high school. So that kind of led me into UCF, and I wasn't fully ready, thinking I was ready. The different level, the different speed, the different conditioning level you had to be at, I just don't think I was ready for it. But it was hard for me, and I worked really hard, and I was just like, I need to go somewhere else that's going to help me. That's why I made my decision to get in the transfer portal, and I did, and I ended up landing at a great school that has been behind my back ever since, and they remind me of that every day, and they have held me through a lot, and I give a lot to my athletic trainer for that because she has helped me through so much. And then in my first, even coming into the university, I came in with an injury. I had to come in getting my first right ACL. My meniscus had to get repaired. And then once we got that fixed, I played for a few more months. And in November, right around my 20th birthday, I tore my second ACL. It wasn't very fun. I had to go into the doctor's office the next day, and they asked me when my birthday was. And I was like, today. No, it wasn't a fun day for me. So I had to start that journey again. So that was like my sophomore, but redshirt year again. So I did that recovery, went around the whole season, came back around to spring again, and then having to have another surgery on my left one to refix my left meniscus. That was about a year ago. That was my last surgery, and I've been very healthy since then. I played my first college career as a junior, my first game as a junior in college, which is kind of crazy. So I still had 2-3 more years of eligibility. So currently where I'm at is I'm a senior, super senior, which you call it, at UTSA. And I'm going to go into my last year of collegiate soccer this fall, only taking one class, which would be really nice. So basically I'm just playing soccer. And then after that, my dreams are still to play after college. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
All right, hold on. Wait a minute. That's a lot on anybody. Like, wow. I played 7 years in the pros and I had 3 injuries. I mean, wow.
Yeah, I mean, close enough. It was 4 surgeries. So for someone who never had any injuries growing up, like 4 major surgeries back to back through the years was tough.
How old were you when you started playing?
Probably maybe 5 or 6, I would say, in the little rec leagues they had going on.
It's a lot of kicking.
Yeah, I mean, we started very young. Yeah, a lot of just kicking, maybe stand up at the sky a little bit. Who knows?
Yeah. I do have another question that I think that a lot of our listeners would appreciate, because we haven't really talked about it. Like, give us some detail on how you go into the transfer portal and figure out where you might go, and you're probably the one who can give us some insight on what the transfer portal, how it works, and how you make a decision.
Yeah, it's definitely different, I would say, for everybody else. But I know one of the hardest things to do for people in college is to get into the transfer portal. A lot of people talk about this isn't the right school for me. I don't know what to do. But to actually take that leap and get into the portal to see what your options are is hard. I know a lot of people that say it but don't actually do it. You don't want to leave your friends. You don't want to leave this. But there's also something that's telling you that you need to explore something else. But that's why I was when I did take that, I was I know what I wanted to do, and I knew I wasn't going to get it where I was at. That's what drove me to put myself in the portal, or however it's done with compliance and things like that. But it was very hard, but the process moves pretty quickly. Once you get into the portal, you have to wait at business hours, whatever. But I just remember I was out of the country. I was actually playing with the youth Jamaican national team. And I remember Monday morning at 8 a.m., the portal had just opened, and I got an email saying, welcome, you're in the portal. And then 20 seconds later, I had 10 emails. And it literally works so quickly because there's coaches literally designed just to sit and watch the portal and click buttons that say we want you, we want you, we want you. But then you have to filter through because you have all of it from the NAIA to D1, and you have to filter through what you want. And I thought it was a lot easier going through the second time because I knew what I wanted. I knew I wanted coaches that actually knew how I played. I knew I wanted a strong athletic trainer. The things that I looked for when I first got recruited, the big school, the wow of this, the wow factors, you realize how not important that is. And the fact of what you want, because you always see it in football or in college soccer, it doesn't really matter where you go to school. It's how much of an impact you make at your school that puts you at a higher pedestal. Like you see guys in the NFL getting drafted from schools that you probably never even heard of. Like, so that's why I kind of took that and I was like, listen, I want to go somewhere and I want to make an impact. And that's kind of what I chose. I was like, I want to play, so I'm going to go to some school that when they first emailed me, UTSA, I had never heard of them before. Never. The only time I really only answered their email because I knew the coach's name, because he was a former coach from LSU who would come out to all of our club games and stuff like that. So I knew his name, but I didn't understand the school he was associated with because he had just changed schools. And then from there, I kind of just got to talking, and I liked what they were telling me. So it kind of felt right. So I just kind of stuck with it.
We've had this transfer portal conversation because, you know, you hate to say it, but really NIL and transfer portal like coincide, right? Because these things kind of came in at the same time, and they've really sort of taken the college athletic world by storm at the same time. And so really the two kind of bleed together. So super great insight there. And with that being said, just talk to us a little bit about your NIL deals. You know, your first thing, I guess, came about. How did you sign your deals? How were you introduced to them? And sort of what does that look like for you?
Yeah. So I am a type 1 diabetic. That's how I got my first NIL deal. I wear this monitor. It's called Dexcom. It's a glucose monitoring system. So it basically, like, on my phone, like, it has like my blood sugar, which I can show you guys, right? Like, it has like my blood sugar on my phone. So it's a really cool, and it's awesome for the diabetic community, and it really changed the game because I was diagnosed at 2.5 and I didn't have that at that age, and I had to prick my finger every 10 to 30 minutes. And now that I don't have to do that, it's a game changer. And it was really me and my one teammate who was also diabetic when I went to this school. We're both like, once it was signed that we could start branding us and stuff for NIL, I was like, wouldn't it be cool to reach out to Dexcom and see if we can make something happen? And we both kind of just like drafted emails and like sent it. And I got a little bit further in the process than she did. And it kind of just took off from there. They kind of just sent out a first, like, this is what it would look like. Like, you would do this, this, and this, and we would give you products. And I was like, and products are just as equal as money in the medical field. So basically, like, they just branded me and I branded them. And it kind of just worked out like that. And after that was my biggest NIL deal. And I'd say it still is because I just re-signed with them again. And I absolutely love working with them. It actually opened up my diabetic community and being able to reach out to other people and kids and talk at events and do things like that. And they send me more Dexcom monitors, which is actually, they're really expensive too. So it's honestly one of my favorite NIL deals. And then I also have Runners Rising, which is it's a nonprofit at our school, and they pick a few different athletes every few months, and basically it's just to put a little bit of money in their pocket. They spread the word about Runners Rising and how they want to help athletes so they can focus on school. They do a few posts, and there's different levels that you could be at Runners Rising, and like they kind of just put a little bit of money in your pocket, and it's like it's kind of nice for some of the student athletes that just need a little like pick me up. And then Firefly was a cool one. It's like a recovery tool. So it was really cool because we use them all in the training room all the time and on travel trips and airplanes because you could just walk with them on, and it helps flush your legs, kind of like recovery boots do and things like that. And you can use it for warm-ups. You can use them after the game, and it's really simple and easy. You put them on for a few hours, or if you're going to use them for a warm-up, you put them on for like 15 to 30 minutes. And I really like them. They help me with my knees, especially on traveling and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool. And then my athletic trainer was like, hey, why don't you shoot them an email? We have a couple other athletes that are sponsored by them and see what happens. And I kind of did the same thing and like reached out. And they're like, yeah, we'll send you 2 pairs of these and we'll do a couple of posts and stuff like that. So I think a lot of more businesses are open to athletes branding them now. So I think it's a really cool thing.
That's awesome. So what would you say, like, if you had to tell somebody who's listening or wondering about supporting athletes in the NIL space, whether that's a business or, you know, a donor or something like that, what would you say to them? And like, how is it affecting you? It sounds like it's doing well for you, but like, what would your message be to them as far as from like a support standpoint or just intrigued on being in the space?
Yeah, I definitely say at first I was pretty cautious about it because I didn't know how it was going to work. But now, like, all I see is a lot of benefits too about it. Like a lot of people that need a pick me up going through college and that couldn't get it before because there were so many rules with the NCAA and anything could get you ineligible. So a lot of times I'd be like, just try it. Like, just try, reach out to the businesses, do what you can, even if it's something small to start with. Like, you never know like where it could take you or how it could help boost your brand and your brand to the community. Because a lot of it is like your community around your school that look up to you guys, and especially guys like on the football team or the basketball team. A lot of the big sports at your school, like a lot of people already know who you are, and to associate yourself with something good too it's good branding for the school and it's good branding for you. So I think the more that people could do it, I think it's also like a really good thing.
Awesome. Marlee, great insight. Really enjoyed this conversation, just getting to kind of tap into the transfer portal, obviously NIL. I love what you're doing with Dexcom and, really just kind of bringing diabetes to the forefront, because I do think that it's an opportunity to also show athletes and up and coming athletes that, hey, I can still go out here and compete at a very high level despite, the circumstances. And, I think that's a powerful tool. And then obviously getting, free stuff out of it, and certainly getting to utilize that technology has certainly made your career easier and can certainly help promote that for others. So again, we appreciate all the insight today. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
No, thank you guys. This was fun.
Awesome. Of course, you can follow Marlee on Instagram at mfray99. That's MFRAY 99. We'll be following you as you enter into your super senior year. Looking forward to that. Good luck out there. Stay healthy. And of course, you can follow us on NIL Now Show on Twitter and on Reddit. Tell a friend. Let us know what you think. Subscribe to the podcast. A big thank you again to Bobak and the Reddit College Football team. Also a thank you to my co-host, Kevin Jones, a.k.a. KJ. And of course, our engineer, Colin Schmaling, our associate producer, Dean Zolkowski, and our executive producers, Richard Diamond, Selena Roberts, and Scott Broder. We'll see you next week, y'all.
Thanks for listening to NIL Now, presented by Headline Studio and Reddit.